To identify oneself with that kind of activity, mediation, one has to accept one, I think, fundamental assumption, namely, the world, in a broad sense, is translatable. If so, it can be mediated. Some years ago, I absolved translation studies, and in the very beginning, every student at our institute had to deal with the problem of the so-called language solipsism. The word is derived from the Latin solus, means only, and ipse, means self, and it's sometimes used as a synonym for selfishness or egotism. As a translator, you often find yourself in the situation when an expression in original language covers a part of reality that in the target language does simply not exist. The Sami language has at about 1,000 words referring to reindeer. In Czech, we have one. In German, it's something very similar. This is a great example of a solipsistic situation. In literature, more than in other fields, rules the famous Wittgenstein's quotation, "The borders of my language are the borders of my world." Thus, in written literature, is it a serious matter because we rely entirely on words. Although the pictures of the world in different languages do not fit one-to-one, we are still able to interpret what they refer to. The correct interpretation leads to something less precise but more important, understanding. The correct interpretation means successful mediation from one human mind to another. The correct interpretation means extending the borders of my solipsistic world. This is not only the principle of translation, personal contact, or, for example, education, but also the principle of circulation of literary artifacts, poems, novels, etc. Interpretation is translators' answer to the problem of language solipsism. With regard to our conference, now I think appears the crucial question how we, now as organizers and curators, are interpreting literature. I believe that we are interpreting it on the level of the whole discourse. With the discourse I refer, in my case, to the field of contemporary poetry, with interpretation to choosing the proper poets and presenting them. You may of course ask, and who are the right ones, the proper ones? Of course this, yes, depends on everyone's taste, and since I can't speak on behalf of everyone, therefore just my standpoint, I was arguing before that the correct interpretation means extending of the borders of my world. Therefore I tend to choose the authors who create through poetic text such worlds of imagination that were for me unknown before and resonates with the world I live in. In this sense is the extending of the world also a fuzzy but determining aesthetic criterion. Such are the authors my colleagues and I are trying to hear at our festival, the Prague Micro Festival, read in the magazine. We have also a journal for contemporary poetry, or translate and publish. Everything this means to mediate. The act of mediation can be seen as something more than just an activity, namely, I think, as a right. This right is directly bound with the right of free speech, a very substantial part of the freedom concept, for example, in Europe. If there are no free media, of course, the freedom of speech is endangered. As a mediator, I take my freedom to spread the words and ideas articulated by others. A right of mediation can also be understood as the right of expanding the world. In terms of this right, I'm willing, and I think I have the responsibility to create the well-known grant applications, consider PR strategies, create budgets, etc. This is the dark side of the moon. the bright side is, in fact, that the things then just happen. For me, this means not trying to do the impossible, but finding out what is actually possible. An example could be the project Display EU, which was realized by Peter Dietze and myself last year. In the very beginning, we considered just translating and publishing some poems in Psilino and Randnummer magazines. Then it surprisingly for us turned into a much larger project. Its outcome is a trilingual anthology, websites, and a new network of German, Czech, and Slovak poets. It cost a lot of energy, and I think we took our right to mediate exhaustively, if I may say so. This is how the book looked like, and there are some over there, so if you're interested, you can, of course, take it. And if there are not enough, just let me know, and I'll bring some more tomorrow. Well, up to now, I was talking about literary mediating, a practice that can be, I think often is, understood as something rather pragmatic, neutral, nice and beautiful, as well as apolitical. I assume that we all somehow feel that our activity is not that harmless. Literary activism, yeah, sounds cool, sounds very sexy. Hey, I'm a literary activist. Sorry. But I was just thinking about it. Okay, the word activism has clear political connotations of something unprescribed and independent. That's what it makes sexy. And seems to be very suitable title for our feelings. But is it? And if so, in what sense? Well, let me tell you a short story from the Czech economical funding of the so-called living culture. That's our name for the independent theatre, music, literature, etc. was spoken about before, from the years 2013 and 14. It's necessary to point out that the funding of the independent public culture comes in my country traditionally from public resources, up to 70%, and in literature even more. Sponsorship in this field does not exist, and the underground culture model does not meet the target of public available culture. These luxurious conditions are an important standard, but every 3 to 5 years occurs a struggle between Ministry of Culture and representatives of the cultural scene for the preservation of this standard. The amount available for living culture varies according to the state budget, and every year the department had to cut the money for living culture as no shorter. Since 2008 to 2013 was the tendency to cut every year some 20 to 25% of the subsidy amount. And then suddenly came a decrease with further 30% for the next year, 2014. Public culture faced a very serious and liquidating economical future because this last cut was beyond the limit of sustainability. What would that exactly mean? For instance, from all of the, I think about 20 literary magazines in Czech Republic, would only 3 survive in printed version. The intended cuts were discovered first by the editors of literary magazines. They informed the colleagues from other art fields, and later on also the public. Editor-in-chief for one of the largest magazines, the poet Adam Borzic, became one of the spokesmen of the whole initiative. My task was to announce and arrange the organization at the Ministry of Culture, and then later organize the negotiations with the minister herself. I can't go through all the developments in this large cultural project. It was kind of unprecedented because it covered the whole independent cultural scene. So everyone was involved, from dancers, people from theater, and so forth. So it was actually the first time after the connected together to protest.
Is it on the national level or on the Prague level?
That was the national level. It was also interesting that not only people from the capital were involved, but they were coming from all around the republic. The result, very nice, was the stabilization of the conditions for living culture for 2014 and hopefully 2015, and the application of the minister. For me, personally, it was a true lesson of political activism in behalf of culture. Was that literary activism? Well, I think so, because it was the condition for literature mediation, its public existence and circulation, which I was protesting together with hundreds or thousands of people for. In my everyday life, I stand for my right to mediate words and ideas in literature in a practical way as an editor, curator, translator, and so forth. In this special moment, I was protesting for the right to mediate and trying to publicly defend this right. To sum up, 2 minutes, or maybe 1. I think we all are mediators, and we actively take our right to mediate. Through our activity, we are performing this right, and when necessary, also defending it. Mediation practice has a clear potential to become a political issue, if understood as a freedom to mediate that is a part of freedom of speech. Therefore, we can hardly separate mediation practice from cultural or literary activism. The potential for the second is inherent in the existence of the first one. The mediation practice involves two extreme poles. On one side stands the pragmatic organizer. On the other side, the political, cultural, and in our case, literary activist. But the everyday mode of literary mediation lies somewhere between these two extremes, and this all has one clear goal: